Beyond. Hello. Hi. Yes, I can hear you. How are you? I'm good. Can I stream audio from Discord so I don't talk to myself on stream? Is that okay with you? Okay.
So, what are you gonna draw?
Well, I'm drawing a model that I found on Instagram. As usual, because I do that daily, I just find people that I want to draw on Instagram and I just do it. How about you? Well,
Well, I'm trying to develop a creature. I've been I just write down.
what sort of creature?
It's like a bird,
Okay.
but I want to be like a monster at the same time.
What is it
So,
inspired by? Like its monster side, maybe by some game or a movie or animated stuff.
mm, actually, it's none of those things. I just thought I would like to have a flying monster in my story.
Okay. Oh, so you're writing like a story, like a novel, graphic novel, or a comic?
Yeah, it's more like a comic.
Okay.
Um, if you mind, I can read it to you, like
Okay.
what I have.
Okay.
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 So, um, in this universe, humanity have got so far with technology and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then they just whatever. I'm gonna just
Okay,
read
okay,
the way I wrote that. All
okay.
right.
All right.
So humans are always seeking more money, more technology. They are never happy. They are never happy. Myths and supernatural stuff are not a thing anymore, and that lead them to their own extermination. After conquering electricity, humankind tries to make a new kind of energy, an endless and powerful energy to charge the world, whatever. After years of searching and testing, they finally did it. Even so, all that energy actually caused an interdimensional hole, which freed a bunch of magical creatures such as demons, fairies, witches, spirits throughout the explosion of that new energy. That definitely changed the whole world, and now everyone could see those who lived right there before the explosion. And after a long and devastating conflict against those monstrous creatures, the world, as they knew, became just an old photograph buried in the sands of time. Full of magic, though, but that was a long time ago. And then, basically, in this explosion, um, after some years, they discovered this new material called by supernatural orbs of ultimate light. Basically, it's just to mean souls, like
Mm-hmm.
for
Okay.
short.
Mm-hmm.
And this material is like a pure energy and can bring the power of bring things to life, objects, and cure and purify things. Um, Despite being some kind of electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, is these souls like everyone has a soul, and the monsters has a soul, and actually there are some monsters like are just, for example, a big old house, but the house is alive, like the monster house,
Mm-hmm.
the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically it. Humans live in small cities. Some of them still in their hideouts, like Fallout, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
I mean, it sounds very interesting. It sounds, when you read that story, it sounded very poetic. Do you write often, or is it your like first attempt at writing?
well, I've already written some things, but I don't have them. I don't think they are pretty good, but
Mm-hmm.
that one, I think it was the one I got Ferris, I think, like too far, too long.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
you write in your own native language often, or mostly in English? And where are you from, actually?
Well, I'm from Brazil,
Okay.
and and y- and a few years ago, I used to write in Portuguese, my native language.
Yeah.
But now I'm trying to write in English because I want this to be in English, like to practice, to write better.
Okay. So
So,
I'll ask once more. So it's your first story in English, or you wrote many more in English? Did I hear it correctly? Because I think you said that it's not your first story, but can you clarify that?
yeah, and in English is my first story, you
Okay.
know.
I mean, it sounds good. At least from the English perspective. It doesn't sound like a newbie wrote that, a beginner, so it sounds good. And it sounds interesting. What was it inspired by?
So it was inspired by The Last of Us, I think. Like all this
Okay.
monster. The monsters are more like the infected in The Last of Us,
Mm-hmm.
but mainly I think it's just things that I like. Like magic, and most of them have this 80 looks, like the white the white tuxedo and all that stuff.
Okay. Do you already have some concepts, like visual concepts, or
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. Actually, the drawings you liked on DeviantArt
Mm.
are the conceptions of the like they are the characters so
Oh, okay.
far that I got. So I'm gonna open so I can clarify better. So basically, this story will be focused on 16. The girl with the Chanel, the haircut.
Mm-hmm.
Um, will be she with Maeve, which is the girl with the blue top and the star, and the star scars, like in the eye, in the right left eye.
Okay.
So basically, um, Maeve you'll be hunting some house or something like that. She will be in the ruins of this old city, exploring, and then this monster house will come, and she won't be able to defend herself, and she will lost an arm. But then, uh, those two, 16 and 17, the boy, the girl I drew, will be close, and then the boy will be will help her, even though they are not supposed to help anyone, because they are androids. They know they are not supposed to understand emotions and all that stuff. But
Mm.
then he will help her, and will bring her to Calavera, and which is the profile picture I put on DeviantArt.
Okay.
Calavera is like the main villain. It's like a mob leader, like mafia or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's he's one of these creatures who just wake up in this world, and at the beginning he will start good, but then he will go to the dark side, and yeah, so he won't be happy with him bringing her there,
Mm-hmm.
because actually androids, they don't usually work. You know, they just work when you put a soul in it, and basically just him can do it. So in his ideal, the soul is like a blank canvas, so he can do whatever he wants, because w- when a soul is off the body, the soul just lost its memories, and just like live in this loop. But the thing you put in the soul will just act as an human or animal or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, he's not happy with that. But the girl who lost the arm, was kind of grateful with him, and then he asked her to go do an errand, like they always do with the 16.
Mm-hmm.
to get more souls and find an android to him. Meanwhile, he fixes the 17. By fixing by fix it, he means like erase his memories and all that stuff, so he can't feel anything anymore. And yeah, and the whole story basically will be 16 knowing that she also feels something for 17, and all their journey of getting the androids, the souls, and all that stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm. Um, why did you decide to create this story? I mean, I see that a lot of people like to create their own universes and characters, but what does it fulfill in you? You don't see that those type of characters um, in the entertainment today, so you decided to create your own because you don't feel fulfilled fully, or are there other reasons why you decided to create your own universe with your own characters?
Well, I think it is because I've always felt I was meant to tell something,
Okay.
to to express my art, creating something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly what kind of verse I should be making. I just think myself as a storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
teller, and I think that's it because I just like it, and I don't know if anyone have told something like that. I think they have probably because it's not such an original concept, but I don't know. I just think it's a good start, and it's something to to keep me drawing also because so I wouldn't know what to draw. Actually, even though I still don't know what to draw, just pretending I know. But I
How,
think that's it.
how do you usually find what to draw? What's your process?
So I usually look at Pinterest or other artists,
Mm.
and then I just think, well, I should do something like that, and then I try to inspire myself through those arts, through
Mm-hmm.
those perspectives,
Do you usually
and maybe
have?
listen to
Okay, okay,
some music.
sorry. Okay.
No, no, usually just listen to music and that stuff.
Does music help you to discover the vibe of your artwork that you want to draw, or maybe something more specific, like an object that you want to draw, or just the base atmosphere of your art?
Yeah, I think music helped me find the vibe I want with the piece in question. I mean, basically, the music can my mood. So maybe if I'm really energetic by the music, really happy with the music, maybe I will find my art better
Mm-hmm.
than it looks. So it will burst my confidence and make me draw more, or make me still drawing and then changing something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And as well with if the music is it's not a good music, or if it don't fit with the vibe, so I will not feel that good to draw. But But yeah, it basically has helped me to find the vibe I want. What about you?
Well, I know that I want to draw girls, so I just go to Instagram and find profiles that of some girl that I like the look of. Then I just go to suggested page from this profile, and just like that I find girls that kind of look similar, or just give off similar vibe. I just draw that. If I find something interesting that I personally like and I want to portray in my style, I just do that. So yeah, I didn't really find the need to create my own characters. I always found that to be very forced when I tried to do that. Of course, I created some of my own characters when I was in school, but I never really liked that. I just did that because most artists did that. I just really like drawing people that I visually like, or maybe I like personally. Maybe I know them, or I just like them as people. That fulfills that emptiness in me when I draw them, and I really like that, so there's that.
Really cool. I was I was like that. I mean, I usually I draw a lot of bodies usually when I was practicing anatomy.
Yeah, okay.
But as always, I've always focused it on girls,
Yeah.
like you did. So I did the same thing that you do right now, like searching for girls or just looking at Pinterest to find something interesting, some pose, something like that.
Have you ever studied art more seriously? Not just like, I want to draw this today, so I'll draw it. Have you tried to like learn specific things, like specific muscle groups, or how to paint light and stuff like that? Or have you always just were drawing more like for fun? As a hobby, do you is art a hobby for you, or do you want to become a professional artist?
So I think it's a hobby. Like I really would love to be a professional, but I don't know if I'm gonna be one, if I'm gonna be um on that part, if I'm gonna go so far. But about this study part, I've tried sometimes, but I really didn't like it that much because mainly because I'm not good, for example, in drawing backgrounds. At least I don't like them that much.
Mm-hmm.
So when I try to do it, I think it's a crap, and then I feel bad for myself, and usually I give up.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's it. Sometimes I try to learn something light and all that stuff. And sometimes it will help. Sometimes I just don't get it. I think I get it. In my mind, it's perfect. It's like the tutorial. But then when I try to put it, it sounds off. It looks off.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't try anymore. So yeah,
I mean,
like
yeah, yeah. Okay, continue.
I know I know I should study like that. At least I think, because if I'm gonna be an illustrator, I have to be able to draw anything or almost anything, to have to have more possibility.
Hmm. I mean, in my opinion, and not only in my opinion, I actually heard it from another artist. Maybe you heard of him, Cynics. He is on YouTube, he
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
tutorials. And he once said that he, for example, wasn't really learning like he wasn't really learning art like from a book. He didn't really study like specific things like you do at school. He was more like he drew stuff that he personally liked and enjoyed and learned by doing, by drawing what he likes. And I personally like this mindset a lot more because before I tried to study art more seriously. I tried to learn muscle groups. I tried to draw cubes and all that stuff. And I think it's important, and you have to know how to how to do that if you want to create better art. But I always found that I learn better when I draw stuff that I like because all the art fundamentals can be applied to anything that you draw. So, of course, you have to think when you draw. You can't really do it mindlessly because you won't learn a lot that way. Of course, your muscle memory will develop and it will be easier to draw for sure, but in my opinion, if you want to learn quicker and if you want to learn in a more constructive way, you have to think about what you're doing. But of course, you have to learn at first those things so you can apply them when you draw stuff that you like. So you still have to know art fundamentals and what they consist of. And it's good to know like very basic things so you can apply them when you draw them. And in that way, you will start learning and you'll start seeing things and how you can apply those fundamentals in your personal work. But still, in my opinion, I like learning by drawing stuff that I like, but I still think that you should think and don't draw your stuff mindlessly because you won't learn anything. Have you studied or at least looked at art fundamentals, like basic things like form, value, gesture, anatomy, lighting, and so on? Have you paid attention to those things?
I think just for lighting and value and anatomy, and I think I think that's it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like it was mainly when I started to paint for real. Like I was like, no, I have to focus on that. I have to learn how to do a decent job with that, you know. And then
Mm-hmm.
I start to learning that shaping part and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because with traditional art, usually I just drill. I didn't paint. I didn't bother to buy a pencil, a color pencil or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got it in digital, I saw out that possibilities. I tried. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I already had that notion of anatomy because said I studied a lot. I didn't study as you said like the group of muscles and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I just did the gesture drawings. Me that's enough, you know, just
Mm-hmm.
knowing shape and the overall looks
Mm-hmm.
of everything is enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's basically it.
Well, what I really like, for example, in your work, that you don't run away from your creativity, because before I was really kind of not really against it, but I always pushed it aside because I always wanted that my like technical side of my art was perfect. And while I was studying that, I kind of all my creativity, like as I said, went away, and I was just only focusing on technical side. That I don't know, all the proportions look correct, it looks realistic, and all those stuff. Because I remember when I started getting into art more seriously, I wanted to be an animator. I wanted to create animations. But then I found one YouTuber whose name is Psychra, and he said that if you want to become a good animator, you should at first, you should learn art fundamentals. So I did that, and I noticed that my art doesn't look as good and doesn't look realistic because at some point I had a goal that I wanted to draw very realistic portraits because I couldn't before draw faces very well. They didn't look appealing to me. So I really wanted to learn that. And I only drew portraits for like several years. And all of them, I was focusing on realism. And I didn't really, I wasn't, at that point, I actually stopped creating my own characters because they didn't look good. And I thought that if I want to make them look good, I have to learn how to draw realistically. And in my opinion, you should learn realism because all the styles that you see today are based on realism. It is better to base your stuff that you draw on something. It is easier than to start from scratch. And I actually forgot what's my point here. But so yeah, I was really scared kind of to do my own stuff from my own creativity because most of the time when I posted stuff that came from my mind, people didn't really like it. So I stopped and just painted realistic portraits. For example, I came back to drawing last year because I stopped and was focusing on videography because it actually was I actually could earn money from doing it because I couldn't do it from making art, so I stopped and didn't draw for like 2 years. But then I came back because I felt inspired and really missed it. And for quite some time, for maybe half a year or maybe a little bit more, I was drawing in my own style, like with line work, very simple coloring. I didn't paint, and I noticed that people they kind of liked it, but there wasn't enough. It wasn't getting a lot of attention. And then I saw some painting on Instagram, and I thought I kind of miss painting. I want to try it again because I stopped painting because I didn't really fully knew what I was doing. I didn't really have my process, but with my own style, I knew exact steps that I have to do to achieve a look that I want, but I didn't have that with painting. So I decided to learn and find that process in painting too. So I started making 2 artworks a day in my own style and in this painterly style. And what I noticed is that people enjoyed a lot more of this realism. They enjoyed my paintings, a lot more than my own style. And I think it really shows that just people really like realism. They love when they can look at an artwork and they can think, wow, this looks real. This looks very realistic because before I was getting like maybe 2 likes, 3 likes from my artworks. Now I get like 100 and around that number. Well, it's a lot more. Of course, you shouldn't focus on other people's opinions. You should do what you like. And it's just the thing is that I really like painting and I loved drawing in my style, so I kind of had to choose because, well, not always you can do what you like. Sometimes you have to adapt to situations, but I still think and believe that you can find a way that you can personally enjoy and do stuff that other people like, so you can create a product that other people enjoy and you can create it in your own way that you enjoy it too. So I went back to painting, and I mean, I really like it. And I still use those same techniques that I used when I was drawing in my style. For example, I sketch in the same way because all the fundamentals are the same. It's just the look of it is different. For example, I don't know, Minecraft looks one way, but it's still the same open world as, I don't know, The Witcher. It's just different styles. The Witcher is more
Yeah,
realistic. Minecraft is more stylized, but it's still the same thing. So when it comes to my style, for example, it's still the same thing. I'm drawing a person. I just apply a different filter on it and it looks different, but still those same fundamentals, anatomy, form, lighting, and so on are the same. You just approach it in a different way, in your own way, and you create what you like. You get inspired from different artists and you steal some things from them and you create your own look. So there is that. What artists inspired your style, your art?
well, it's a good question. Actually, I didn't mesmerize a lot of names, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I basically look at Pinterest and sometimes Instagram
Mm-hmm.
and just and just wish I could think like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I really like the Joy Oblivion. I think that's the name of
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a girl. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Your art actually now is
Aww.
a kind of an inspiration for me. You know,
Aw,
like
thank
the
you.
portraits and all that trippy vibe.
Aw, thank you.
It's really cool.
Thank
Um, I'm just browsing right now my Instagram to
you. Mm-hmm.
to tell you names. The Govi 9807.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the cartoonish style.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I try to do realistic, you know, but um I get it to do it. I have to paint better, and I'm trying to do at least the semi-realism
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know, I like it better.
Mm-hmm.
And about the realism getting more likes, I think it's because it's look harder than a cartoonish style,
Yeah,
you know.
that's true. Yeah.
Pe- pe- People look and like see you in such a higher ground that's amazing, fantastic, and something simple or maybe shapier, like uh, a character that you clearly nag or is just a bunch of circles people doesn't like because it's
Mm-hmm.
on simple,
But it
even though
actually
that's
isn't.
the
It just
idea.
looks simple.
Yeah,
I mean, realism will always be more appealing to a wider audience of people because artists, of course, they they can enjoy a lot more than like regular people who are not really into art. They'll just look at something. They'll look at the skill. No, I don't know. Well, they will appreciate realism a lot more because it looks like it takes a lot more skill. But people who actually work in this field will know that animation or cartoony style takes just as much skill as a realistic portrait because, well, you still must have all that knowledge, and actually it is a lot harder to simplify those shapes because you have to understand the reality of it, the base of it, and it's actually a lot harder to simplify it by yourself because, well, realism, you can see it everywhere, but like simplified stuff like cartoony, for example, style, you have to put some your own creativity, something from yourself, and it's sometimes very hard to find. Sometimes it is really hard to find what you actually like, and you have to put some work into that too and actually develop something more or less original. I don't believe I don't believe there is original stuff. I just think most stuff just look a little bit different with some different spice to it, but still, everything is stolen or borrowed from something. So yeah,
Yeah, I think
realism. Yeah. Okay, continue. I'm
I
just
think
rambling.
I think you are right because basically when when you start to learn how to create your own characters, at least that was what was told to me, is like you can start drawing some other thing, like for example, yeah, you can start drawing Spider-Man, but then once in a while you try to change something. You try to maybe change the color, or maybe don't draw the web,
Mm-hmm.
in his uniform, and then you start changing, and then you can just pretend he doesn't, he has super speed, and then you drew it, he's like running.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you started as a Spider-Man, and then you ended with something different.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that you are right. You know.
Mm-hmm. Like, for example, a very simple thing. Now I started to use those very exaggerated lens flares, those circle things that I do. And for example, those things were inspired by one artist whose name is Juan. I don't remember his last name, but he was doing. Like, he applied on his portraits, like, different squares and similar shapes, and I really like that because it added like this very quick um, how's that word, focal point. And it's kind
Oh,
of cheating the system because you actually add a shape and show people where they have to look at because it's, how's the word, it actually sticks out and it is more noticeable where you have to look. And I really liked this aesthetic, so I tried applying it. At first, it started as like simple squares, like stuff that he did. But then I thought maybe I can add a little bit more depth to it. So I started like adding those shapes in perspective, and I realized that sometimes when I, for example, in my own experience, when you paint portraits and those angles, or I could say lens is not wide enough, because I really like photos with a wider lens because it looks more dynamic. But sometimes references that I draw from are not very, don't look very dynamic. They kind of look flat. So this technique that I do with those circles, it actually adds depth um, to my artworks, because it actually adds some perspective and some depth, as I said before. Um, so yeah, it actually helped, but it's this kind of thing that I do now. Uh, it happened. It's I started creating it by copying some other artists, and it just developed from that. For example, I now start adding more like graphic stuff on my artworks, like in the corners and all that stuff. So it actually was copied, or no, not copied, inspired by the same artist, because I noticed he sometimes adds some patterns in the corners, and I really like that. And also, I wanted to practice how to draw patterns, so I started doing that. And then I thought my artworks start to look like album covers. Maybe I should try to do that, because in my free time for the songs that I like creating my own album covers. So I thought, why not maybe focus on that, because I really like music, and I really enjoy the process of like painting something and adding some extra stuff on it, like maybe in different style, or maybe some other stuff. So yeah. So all in all, I agree with what you say. Like you mentioned, Spider-Man stuff, that you start to draw maybe something that a lot of people can recognize, but from that you develop something of your own by changing some stuff, and it becomes something
Yeah,
else and
I
something,
mean,
yeah.
for example, if we use, for example, you, for example, we can take a beautiful girl's picture,
Mm-hmm.
then you started focusing on drawing her, but then maybe something went wrong, maybe you didn't like her nose so much, and
Yeah,
then you start to change it, and then when you see you think, whoa, it would be really cool if you had face tattoo or I don't know, another hair. And
yeah,
then when you see, you basically create another person based on a real person.
yeah,
So that is what usually I do, because in portraits I can't really do someone like if it, it's just because I tend to, sometimes it just doesn't work like that. But the point is, um, your art is very cool, and
oh,
I just had an idea for you. I know it's not the exactly what you were looking for, but at doing a moment. But I thought if you do a portrait in this classy old style, like for example Mona Lisa,
mm-hmm,
but you do it in your style with that trippy vibe and all that stuff.
mm-hmm,
But for example, maybe the same pose, maybe the pose that usually people were taking portraits,
mm-hmm.
something like that would be interesting, I think.
Yeah,
But
well, mm-hmm.
by the way, it's fantastic that what you do with that 2000s vibe.
Yeah, I
It's
really
really good.
like that older aesthetic, that 90s, 2000s look. It just looks very appealing to me, very nostalgic. So yeah, but I mean, like for example, you mentioned Mona Lisa and painted in my style. For example, when I paint portraits, I I personally don't like changing person's features too much because, well, I still want them to look like themselves. It's always very tricky with the likeness of the person because, well, of course, I personally don't like bigger noses and all that stuff. But if the person has it, I won't change it because um, I always tag those people that I draw, and I want them to look like they look in real life, and so they don't get maybe offended or stuff like that. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I get it.
but what I like to do, and for example, I remember Sycra said it that you can't really change facial features too much, but you can always play with the hair of the person. It doesn't really add to. Of course, hair can be very recognizable, but still you can play with hair a lot more than you can with eyes or lips or noses. So I always perfect hair of the person. I really like to make it more flowy and more interesting. I mean, I um, I fix sometimes the features of the person because my process of painting or drawing is based on rule of thirds because all the stuff that I draw I base on rule of thirds. Like you can notice if you look at my art a little bit. Um, um, if you pay attention a little bit more to my art, you can notice that I always draw like in thirds. My lines are always one line is longer and the other that is connecting to that the same line is shorter by a third. Personally, I like this ratio. I find it appealing. And in my opinion, when you build a style, you should find that ratio that appeals to you and build on that ratio all the objects that you draw so it feels in harmony, it feels cohesive and consistent, and it, in my opinion, it start to look better because, for example, the basic designing technique is 70-30, which means that you should always, well, you shouldn't always, you can always experiment, but the suggestion is that you don't, for example, don't add details everywhere. You should leave some spaces for your eyes to rest. So, for example, you can detail space in the 30% of your object and leave 70% empty, or you can reverse it so your eyes don't get exhausted by looking at your artwork. And by that, I mean that I don't know what I mean. I'm just rambling. But, um,
So I've listened something similar, but it was with the shading part,
mm-hmm,
that usually you can do a blocky shady, and then you just don't do the details or not that much of details in the part which is in shade.
mm-hmm.
Um, and then sometimes I do it and I think it looks really good. I didn't thought about all that part of the eyes are resting and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but it creates a good visual, I think.
Hmm.
So,
For example, okay, you have something more to say or not?
no, no, I'm gonna send you what I'm
Okay,
working on right now.
okay.
No, okay. Okay, it's not here. It's here. Yeah. So it's not basically what you draw, but it's like a monster. So what you think?
So you're drawing it right now?
Yeah.
I mean, I like the head design. It looks good. I think it's. Can I critique it? Can I critique your work? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, I really like the head design. I think it looks interesting. I is that inspired? You said it was inspired by a bird, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah, that's it.
It kind of
Like maybe
reminds
a
me.
bat or something.
Okay. Oh, it looks like a bat, and it kind of reminds me of some fish, and maybe a spider because of the eyes, because it has many eyes. I think it's kind of empty in the chest area, but I know it's not complete, and maybe you'll add something there. Also, if I can critique your anatomy a little bit, in my opinion, the right arm is too short, and the forearm area and hand area is too long compared to his bicep and his shoulder, because your elbow should end at the waist area, and your hand, the tips of your fingers, should line up with your crotch area. And in my opinion, if he straightened out his arm, it wouldn't line up, so you should pay attention to that. Um, but I mean, it looks interesting. I can't really critique your design because it really is your taste, but still, I really like his head design. It looks cool. Um, if I could critique some of the fundamentals more, his horns uh, are not in perspective very well. I think his left horn should be, or maybe no, his right horn should be a little bit smaller. Because if you would paint, or draw a grid of a perspective, let's say, because the horizon line looks like it would be around his waist, maybe a little bit above. And if you would draw a vanishing point, those horns wouldn't line up on that line. I think his right horn should be a little bit lower, and it would look more correct. Because now it looks like his right horn is growing from his forehead, not from the sides of his head. His wings that are growing from the sides of his head on the right side doesn't really look correct either. In my opinion, the lower wing should be a little bit bigger. Um, the upper wing maybe. No, actually, it should be visible on the right side of his head. His neck doesn't really look properly drawn either. Sorry for a lot of critiquing, but I'm trying to help you. So you can take it or leave it, but I think his neck is growing from his chin and not the back of his head because his neck should be skewed a little bit to the back so it grows from the back of his head, not from the front. Um,
Yeah, but the neck was intended to be like that.
okay. Was
You
it
know, like
inspired by some
the.
animal or.
Just a second, wait.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm back.
Okay.
So, it was inspired, but at some point it was not. Like I didn't intend it to be s- too much functional. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's more like
It's a stylistic choice.
yeah.
Okay. I mean, I mean, the silhouette of it looks cool when his neck is growing from his chin. I mean, it sounds kind of funny, but I mean, it has a interesting shape. It has like an arrow shape to it. I mean, it kind of fits with the theme of a bird because it kind of is an arrow in a way because it's flying and it's fast. Um, I mean, if it's a stylistic choice and if it's a conscious choice, then sure, then it's fine. Um, so yeah. Are you planning to draw a full figure of this character or just like you drew here? Like composition is something like this, similar to this? Or are you planning to draw a full figure?
Well, I'm planning to draw a few figure,
Okay.
but it's like those character sheet I did, like
Mm, okay.
with some poses and
Mm,
stuff like that.
mm-hmm.
So I'm just doing the overall, like to see what he will have and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
My
But
another.
by the way,
Okay.
thanks.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. It's all good. Well, I have another suggestion for you. I'm seeing
Yeah,
that,
sure.
for example, how are they called? Hips, hip area. You drew this rectangular shape. Of course, I understand that it's a construction sketch, but in my opinion, it would be better if you drew a cube there. I mean, I don't mean like square cube, but a rectangular cube, like, longer. What I mean is that when you draw your construction lines, that you add dimension to them. You don't draw like 2D shapes because it is easier in my opinion to construct your figures a lot more when you actually draw three-dimensional shapes. I can show you. You can go to my stream on my YouTube channel and I can show you live what I mean if you want.
All right. All right.
It will be easier for me to explain because I find it a lot more helpful when you actually add dimension to everything because it looks more three-dimensional. Can I show your artwork publicly? Is that okay?
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, no one's is watching, but still,
No, no problem.
maybe. Are you here? Uh, did you already turn on the
Yeah, I'm
stream?
watching.
Okay. So what I mean, and before I did that with a red color, like my main drawing was in black, but I added dimension with a red color. So I see that you're using Photoshop too, so you can see that there are two like colors that you can select and you can switch them with an X button. So I always did like I added to a secondary color red color. Yeah, and when I was drawing I always added dimension with a red color. Like you can see like it has a wall and it looks like more three-dimensional. So what I meant here, because you drew this 2D rectangle, and in my opinion it would be better because your figure is facing to this side and your hips look like they're facing to this side and it kind of looks broken. So in my opinion, add your curvature and your S lines and all that stuff a little bit more subtly, because it looks kind of broken in my opinion. So what I would do is I would add a wall here. And it already looks a bit better. Like there is a spine and all that stuff, and you can start adding, I don't know, legs. And I always, like when I draw, for example, a cylinder, I don't really think about it as a round shape. I think of it a little bit more as a right-angled shape, so I'll just draw a line here and it already feels three-dimensional. So in my opinion, you should think more like that. It will be easier for you. For example, you can add circles to your stuff. Like already it is a lot easier to understand the direction of a thing that you draw. Like for example, it already feels when I add a circle that this figure is looking to that side. For example, you can add to the shoulders those circles. Like imagine that you're adding some pattern on your body parts. Like for example, there is a forearm, so it is round. You can add a wall here because everything has like upper side and sides and bottom side. So for example, if it is a forearm, it will have like this top side and there will be a side. You can add a ball here for a elbow and you can connect stuff like this. It will be a lot it will feel a lot more real and in my opinion better. So yeah, if you got something from this, I am very happy, but if you didn't understand, well, you can ask me. If you didn't understand
I got
something.
it.
So yeah.
I got it. Thanks, man.
So it is better like this. Oh, and it is very nice to add like center lines, like add crosses everywhere. I mean, I learned this technique from Kim Jong-gi. He doesn't speak English, but I watched his one video where he started putting his figures in boxes and it kind of clicked for me, because you can in real life you can put yourself in a box and it will work, so it should work in a drawing form too, and it is a lot easier to understand how does your figure work in perspective, where's the top side, where's the sides and all that. So I recommend it. I personally find it very useful. When I did figure drawings, I always did that, and it was just easier for me and more constructive. So yeah, so here's that. Like for example, even I'm drawing this girl right now, so I'm always thinking that there is a top side of her nose. If you like watch more of my speed drawing videos, those process videos that I do, you can always notice that I add circles on a forehead because there is a front side of a forehead, there is sides of the head, so it's round, but you can like simplify and deconstruct it in that way. And it is kind of a quick way to realize if your form works, because for example cheekbones, they have sides and they have like upper planes, they're called planes, and I always, for example, add a circle here because it's round here, but it already feels when I add this pattern on a form, and it already feels like it has shape, it has dimension. So here's that. I hope it helps.
Surely does, Mira.
Because I always struggled when I tried to construct my stuff with those round shapes like spheres, cylinders, and similar stuff. I always found it very complicated because, for example, if we'll take a 3D program, it has all those polygons. When you start modeling, I'm not a modeler. I can't use 3D programs. I never fully understood them, and I didn't really have the motivation to spend my time understanding them. But still, basic thing is that when modelers start modeling, they don't start modeling with very high polygon shapes. They start from very simple right angled shapes like cubes. Of course, they use spheres and all that, but in my opinion, it is a lot easier to turn a cube into a cylinder than it is to start with a cylinder because it has a lot of planes on it, and it is kind of a complicated shape. So why should you start complicated when you can start simple and add those dimensions later? In my I always struggled with that, so I found this way a lot easier for me. Also, I love the aesthetic of it. I love building my figures from like cubes and right angled shapes. I just really like how they look and feel because they look very three dimensional. So I really like that. So I started doing that and experimenting with it, and it kind of clicked for me. So I use it till this day. So maybe it will help you too, and maybe you'll be able to apply it to your own work. So yeah.
Right, right.
Because still, those principles you can apply to anything uh, when you know the parts that you're drawing. For example, I personally can draw anything, and I'm not bragging. I'm just what I mean is that I know my fundamentals, and I learned how to deconstruct those objects that I draw in a very simple way. So, like this, you can draw basically anything. Of course, it takes practice. For example, I still suck at drawing cars, for example. They just look very complicated to me, and I don't really like it. But if I would have to draw a car, I would know my process and how to actually achieve it. But I couldn't do it very easily, but still I could do it because I know my process. For example, even sometimes with portraits, I find that maybe a likeness is off or construction is off, but I still know my ways of um, how to
Fix it.
correct my mistake. Yes. So, I mean, in my opinion, every artist should have his process and his second plan if something doesn't work out. Because in a professional field, well, you always have to do your job like in any other job. So I don't really agree with artists that only draw from inspiration, especially if they want to become professional artists. Because, well, in my opinion, it doesn't really work like that. As your job, it really won't work like that. You should have your process. Because, for example, if you'll go to the shop and you want to, I don't know, buy some biscuits that you like, but every time they will taste different, well, you won't buy them anymore. But if um, that production company, that factory that makes those biscuits, those cookies, if they'll have their formula that they can apply to those biscuits every time, well, there'll be a lot more people who will want to buy them. So my point is, process is important and formulas are good. So there's that. I'll I'll be right back. I want to turn on some lights because it is very dark in my room. I'll be right back, okay?
All right.
And I'm back. How many dogs do you have?
Well, it's four dogs. Yeah,
Oh,
four dogs.
are you
Actually, I'm on my girlfriend's house, so
okay?
it's hers dogs.
Are you a dog person or a cat person?
Well, before like having one, I
Mm-hmm.
was more a cat person, but then when I just when I come over here, I
Mm-hmm.
realize maybe I'm more a dog person, you know,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
because the cats didn't like me that much, but the dogs are really sweet and really cute. So,
Yeah. Well,
what about you?
I always wanted a dog when I was little, but my parents told me that we don't have time to look after them, so and you won't be able to do that by yourself, so sorry, but we can get you a dog. But I still kept asking them for a dog. I started drawing myself with some dogs so they would take a hint, but still that didn't happen. Then we started thinking about like smaller animals. I don't really know how they are called in English, but they're like squirrels plus big tail, and they're very fluffy. I don't know how they are called, but we thought maybe we could get something like that. And then we went to the shop and we saw some cats and thought maybe we should get a cat. So we bought my cat. Um, and she is already 10 years old. And I really love her. Um, I mean, after she eventually passes away, I think I would like to get a dog so I could experience it. And I do agree that dogs are a little bit friendlier, and cats love to stay away from their people a little bit more. But I mean, every cat is different. Some cats really like the company. Some cats um, like to keep some distance. For example, my cat, she doesn't bite, she doesn't scratch. If I don't annoy her too much, she will maybe start biting a little bit, but she's not like very aggressive or anything. She's actually very friendly. Um, but for example, she doesn't really come on my lap and doesn't sleep on my lap. She never did that, maybe once. She only goes to people and stays around them who feed them. So, for example, my grandmother feeds her, so she'll stay around her a lot more often than me because I don't really feed her because my grandmother does that. But still, we are very good friends. If she needs some medical assistance, I do that. If I need to cut her nails or something like that, so I do that because she trusts me more. And my relatives trust me more for some reason, but I do that, so yeah. But maybe in the future I'll get a dog. What kind of breed are your girlfriend's dogs are? And maybe what breeds do you personally like?
Well, actually, I don't know any of them,
Mm-hmm.
any of breeds
Mm-hmm.
in general, but I don't know. I just know their colors, so if it helps.
I mean, I don't know.
Like I
Yeah, yeah, okay.
no you can speak,
I
you
mean,
can talk.
I don't know breeds in English too. I mean, I don't really know many of them in my native language as well, but I mean, I generally like maybe smaller dogs. I don't know, I like some bigger dogs, but most of the time I find that I like smaller dogs more. I don't know. My
Yeah, me
mom's
too.
friend had, or maybe still has, Yorkshire. Maybe it is in English like that. Um, so I always wanted one too. But as I said, my parents didn't really want to get a dog because, well, I wouldn't be
Yeah,
able to look
mine either.
after it because I was still a kid, so it would be a
Hmm.
problem. But maybe in the future, I'll get one. So yeah.
So I did um what uh what you what you teach me.
Yes.
So here he goes now with a skeleton. I didn't draw anything else. I just did the full body.
Mm-hmm.
All
Well,
right.
now, yes, now it is. Okay, critiquing time. Um, in my opinion, like on the torso area, the center line is a little bit off. In my opinion, it should be pushed a little bit to his right side because it's a little bit too close to us. Because, for example, if you will put a cube in a perspective um, with a center line on it, basically, perspective is not really that hard to understand in general when you just simplify it in these steps. Like everything that is closer to us will take a lot more space and everything goes from the same vanishing point, which means that every line that you draw will get skewed a little bit, so in that way it will feel a lot more three-dimensional. I mean, I can show you again, so if you'll go to my stream I can show you what I mean.
All right.
visually. Sometimes it is hard to understand verbally. So do you see it?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so this line is off. It should be a bit more here, because when there is a cube and it is in perspective, this line gets further, because, well, from the front side it looks like this, but when it gets in perspective it shifts more to that side, and there is more space here and less space here. Because now, on your drawing, it looks like this. It looks more like this, and doesn't feel right. This feels more natural because it goes into perspective. Like here's a horizon line, for example, here's a vanishing point, and if you'll draw out those lines, it goes there. So if you'll draw more something like this, it will get further into that point. So here's that. I mean, I don't really know how you could practice drawing central lines. I mean, the basic idea is just what I told you. Like, a central line will get further the more it gets rotated, because it goes back into perspective. What I found very useful is doing, like, for example, if I'll take this reference picture that I'm drawing from, is to draw planes on a person and draw those, you know, like polygons, like in 3D models, for example. Like you draw a shape, this is a front side of her forehead. You can draw that circle that I always draw. And for example, you can start drawing those lines, and you can start following that form. Here's this nose bridge. No, it's not a nose bridge. This is a nose bridge. This part that goes down, and you can start tracing it. I mean, it would work better if she rotated her face a bit more. Well, we can do that on this anime dude. For example, you can draw like this front plane of his face, and here's the central line. Here is the back of his head. I mean, most people simplify heads in spheres. I like to do it in cubes because it is a little bit easier for me. And what I'm trying to tell you here, oops, I tripped on the picture, that you should start like to understand how to draw those central lines. You should start to trace maybe, and just feel the form. It goes back, it goes to the front. I mean, I learned like that, so I don't know. Maybe you should try it too. And just draw like in the middle of those forms. I'm not a good teacher. That's why I stopped doing tutorials. But it's the basic thought process that I go through. So maybe it will help you. So yeah, there's that. But you're drawing this line. It's a little bit too close to us. It should be here. It already feels more in front, because here it is too far. So yeah. But yeah, basic idea, you got it. You just have to practice with it and you can get great results. So yeah.
Alright, thanks.
For example, this line is just straight. Should be a little bit more like this. because it's just straight. Because it is rotated, so... I mean, it really helps to, I don't know, look at 3D models and just look how they work. Oops. Oh, whatever. Okay. So there's that. I hope it helped.
It surely does.
I mean, it's kind of nice to learn how to use some 3D program, because you can actually see how objects work in three-dimensional space. I mean, I don't know how to do that, but I still think it's very helpful when you're learning to understand maybe quicker, because you can rotate that object, or maybe you can even have something in real life that you can rotate and look at it very carefully and see how things move. For example, it is very helpful to draw, for example, self-portraits by looking in the mirror, and for example, you can draw yourself from the front, and then you can rotate your head a little bit and see how planes change in perspective, how form changes, and you can learn like that. I mean, it's all about fundamentals. Personally, I learned fundamentals from Psychra that I mentioned before. I learned fundamentals from Psychra. Psychra was the main guy that I learned fundamentals from. There was this site called Control Paint. I learned a lot from it. I mean, all the other artists are good as well, like Cynics, QBrush, or Mark Brunet. He's very good. I mean, you can find your own. There are a lot of tutorials now on YouTube. It was a lot less before, like in 2012. Now there are a lot of tutorials that you can learn from. So there's that. I mean, you can always learn from books. I don't enjoy reading books. I can't concentrate. My attention span is very short and it goes away and I start thinking about other things very quickly. But if you like reading, I mean, a lot of artists recommend Andrew Loomis and his books. I mean, I looked at them. I looked at the pictures and thought, okay, that's interesting, but I didn't really read a lot from it. But I mean, I don't like his method. Not because it is bad, it is just too complicated for me, because as I said before, he simplifies his shapes in spheres and those round objects. I don't really prefer it. I like Kim Jong-gi's method, because he simplifies his figures in cubes, and I just prefer it. And I find that a lot of Japanese artists, or maybe he's Korean, I mean Asian artists, simplify their figures in cubes and right-angled shapes. So I find this method more approachable for me and easier to understand. I mean, at first it gets, like most things, at first it is very messy and you maybe don't fully understand why you're doing this, but with practice, with drawing a lot, you start to understand it and it kind of becomes natural. You just even stop thinking about it too much. It becomes all about muscle memory. It's always hard at first.
You saying that reminds me of Karate Kid, you know?
Who? Is that an artist or?
No, the movie. Ka- Ka-
Oh.
Karate Kid. Karate Kid.
Oh. Oh.
Kid.
Yeah. Is it the original? I didn't watch original ones. I watched a remake with Will Smith's son. I didn't really watch those original movies. I wanted to start because I know that it is very high praised that Netflix series on Netflix. How it's
Oh
called,
yeah,
Cobra
yeah.
K. So I wanted to watch those movies so I can start watching the series, but I never really had time. And yeah, I just didn't really get into
Well,
it.
uh-huh. I have watched the series
Hmm.
and the movies,
Hmm.
but you didn't have to watch the movies to start watching this series, you
Oh.
know. You just have to get the basic idea,
Hmm.
and that is exactly what the Will Smith film passed, you know.
Hmm.
So I said that that reminds me of that movie because it's like when it's like when Jackie Chan is teaching him
Hmm.
karate,
Hmm.
but you know actually he's just putting his jacket on and off and something like that.
Hmm.
So basically he's learning, but he didn't realize he's learning,
Yeah. And it's
and all that
similar
stuff.
situation like I said before, for example, that you can learn fundamentals by doing what you like. Of course, he wasn't doing something that he likes because he was just putting his clothes on and off, but it can those fundamentals, it just shows that those fundamentals can be applied to anything. Of course, Jackie Chan could have think of some more enjoyable activity, but he did that, but it still shows that it can be applied to anything, that basic knowledge. Like the world um, is built on physics, for example. Everything that surrounds us is based on a the same idea that is physics, for example, or biology and all those sciences, but still everything is held together by those basic main ideas. So it can be applied to art too and any other thing that you do. Yeah, so here's that. Are you still here?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm the I'm the one watching also. I don't know if there is anyone else watching.
Yeah, it's kind of lonely here. I usually don't turn on my mic because, well, I don't really have anyone to talk to. Sometimes, if my friend has some time, I talk to her. But yeah, it's kind of difficult to talk to yourself daily about the same thing, so I don't usually do that. If someone joins, I talk to them, but yeah.
So, what did you like in my art? Like the ones just like it.
I mean, as I said
In
before,
art.
I like that you keep your creativity. Well, I have to look at it again, so because I don't remember it fully. But um, I mean, I like the ideas. For example, in this first portrait, I mean, in the latest portrait that you did, I love. I like the design. Um, it's an interesting idea. I love this eye idea, like an eye next to an eye. I like this composition idea. It looks cool. Um, um, I think you could have added more depth to your work, maybe. I mean, compositionally, because it now kind of looks uh, stale. If it was your intention, then it's fine, but generally, it is better to add more dynamic things in your art because it looks more exciting. So, for example, this rumble things, you could have added more like in the front and made them bigger. So there would be like shape variation and well, actually put them in perspective, so closer to the camera, and maybe add something simple or maybe something in the background. I mean, like maybe paint something simple and blur it, so it would add more dimension. Um, I mean, your lighting is a bit off. Because, for example, I can see that by the cast shadow under her head, light comes from the top right side, from her side. So, for example, a lot of shadows are not correctly placed. For example, a cast shadow under her nose is uh, to
Too
it's
intense.
it's it's lit like the light would be from the top and not from the side, so it has to be a bit skewed. Like you know that basic lighting that it's called Rembrandt, like when you get that triangle on the other side of your face, and one side is
Oh yeah.
lit and the other side is in the shadow, and you get the triangle. So this situation looks more like that based on that cast shadow uh, under her head. Because, for example, those rumble things cast shadow correctly, the cast shadow on the left side of her face, but the shadow under her nose is a bit incorrect. Those eyes should be in the shadow too, unless they are the light source and they are. How's that word? They are emitting light, but I don't think in this situation they are emitting light. Or maybe I'm
No,
wrong.
they're not.
Well, they should be then in a shadow. Or if you don't want them in a shadow, then you should change the lighting situation. Maybe put your light source in the front of her face, so her eyes will be lit too, because from what I see here, they should be in the shadow. Um, I mean, you're. I mean, I'm critiquing your work maybe a little bit harshly, so I'm sorry. But still, I really like the design. I think it looks interesting. I love how the hair looks. design-wise. I love the eye idea. I love that on one piece of rubble there is like this cat nose and mouth and whiskers. It looks very cool. But fundamentally, I think it's flawed, and you should pay attention to that a bit more. Because, for example, even her face looks flat because it doesn't really have any sides, any shadows on the side of her face. Like her cheekbones, like it looks like her face only has one plane that is in the front, but there are no sides, so it kind of looks flat. There is
I get it.
there is a noticeable difference in values that isn't consistent. Because, for example, when I start painting, I choose my darkest value and I fill shapes in my darkest value that I choose first. So I stay consistent. I start simple with simple shapes because, for example, what I mean right now is that the corners of her lips are a lot darker than her nostrils. And in this situation, they should be the same value, especially because her nose is in the shadow, so it should be very dark there. But right now, it doesn't look proper because your values are inconsistent. That basic logic isn't there, so it doesn't look consistent. So yeah, you should pay attention to skin temperatures because I noticed that it doesn't really get warm above the nose bridge because you put some warm tones there and it doesn't really work like that. Skin gets warm when there is no bone underneath. So, for example, why most of the time cheeks are red, nose is reddish, lips are reddish because there isn't really bone underneath and those surfaces are more translucent. Light goes through them, that's why it starts like glowing, because light bounces against blood cells, so they start shining, and that's why those parts are more reddish. I mean, there are pictures like templates that you can find online on skin temperatures, like basic colors, because there are a lot of colors in the skin, like greenish tones, bluish tones, reddish tones, grayish tones. There are purples. There are a lot of purple tones in the eyes, for example, around eyelids. So there's that. There are a lot of subtle colors in the skin. For example, what you did pretty well is that you put more grayish tones in her chin area and her mouth area, because most of the time it works like that on a skin, that those parts are more grayish. So there's that. Yeah. I mean, what I see by looking at your work, that there is style inconsistencies. Because some artworks have line art, line work, some don't. I mean, if it is your intention, that it's fine. But in my opinion, if you want to build a world maybe you should choose a little bit focused style.
Oh, yeah, I get what you're talking about, but
Yeah.
this is different, you know. The Alita is it's a
Oh, okay.
it's another thing, you know. It's just a piece, man, even.
Okay. Well then it's fine. Um, but yeah, the most issues that I find are like fundamental issues. I mean, design wise, idea wise, it's cool. And I can't really critique that too much because it is your personal thing. But, um, for example, you did here in your third post, you did a portrait study from a photo. Um, did you do it in color or did you start from in black and white?
I did it in color. I tried to pick the right colors
Mm-hmm.
without you know,
So
using
it's a. I
the
mean,
tool.
yeah, I understand what you mean. Um, and it is good to like study colors and all those things, but I can see a big issue here, and it is values. Because if you'll turn your artwork in black and white and your reference in black and white, you'll see a lot of inconsistencies. Because, for example, lighting here is off. For example, the right side of his face, where a shadow should be, it's not dark enough. I mean, as you're studying, you can actually color pick and you can see uh, how much you're off in brightness of your tones. Of course, there are anatomy issues, but for example, his nose and mouth area, like bottom area of his face, is too long. His forehead is a little bit smaller. Um, Also, a tip for hair: you don't have to paint every strand of hair. You should simplify hair in big blocky shapes, and then you can add details. Most of the time, I notice that artists add like texture or details in areas that are in light, not in shadow, because, well, what's in the dark we don't really have to see because it's kind of not meant to see, not meant to be visible. So our brains ignore that and we pay attention to the bright parts, and it will look more appealing that way if you'll add more details in brighter parts and less details in shadows. Because, for example, now your hair all looks bright, while in the reference it is not like that. Of course, you said that it is a color study, so I guess you studied different things, but in my opinion, still fundamentally, those other things at least should be closer. Because, for example, if I'll take it as a color study, there are some blues in hair in the reference picture. There are some purples, like very dark, desaturated purples. For example, in on the left side of his head, um,
Yeah,
I can see some subtle, maybe pinks, very subtle things like greens. Like the background is a little bit off. It should be darker and more bluish because it looks more green in your artwork. Um, like for example, the shadow part of your painting, like the right side of his face, has more purple tones, some more yellows. Your artwork really misses yellow tones, in the skin area more oranges. Uh, like his eyelids are a lot more saturated because, as I said, they're more translucent. So they should be redder. His eye color feels more like blue. I mean, I know I'm being too harsh, but I'm just looking at it and just pointing things out, and hopefully they help you.
It's all right.
I
It's
mean,
all
it's
right
a study,
because
so
that piece in question, I really don't like it that much. It really doesn't look like the actor or anything like that. But
mhm.
I don't know. I just posted to post something.
I
Uh,
can tell you a cheat how to copy something without that much effort. Kind of. Well, firstly, if you want to make a study and you don't really want to spend too much time drawing, you can use a grid method. Maybe you saw it. You draw a grid over your reference, and then you copy the exact same dimensions of your grid, and you put it on a canvas that you'll be drawing on, and you can then focus on those little sectors, those little squares, and copy the angles from there. Another method that is a little bit more complicated, you can flip your reference upside down, and you can start drawing your drawing your construction upside down. It is easier to draw that way. I still prefer to draw uh, like my initial sketch properly. Like, I don't flip it upside down because I still want to get the basic feeling of that person by my own. But if I feel that the likeness of the person that I'm drawing is very off, I'll then flip my reference and my artwork upside down, and I'll start copying shapes literally without adding too much from myself. I'll just copy how it is on a photo. And now, why it is easier to flip your reference upside down and paint or draw like that, because our brain doesn't interpret um, those parts, those objects, in a proper way, because we are not used to seeing object, or in this case faces, upside down. So when you turn your reference upside down and you look at an eye or lips, your brain um, doesn't really see those objects as they are. Your brain sees it more as just basic shapes. Of course, you still understand that you're looking at the lips, at eyes, but still they look different. And for your brain, it is easier to just see basic shapes. Because, for example, when you draw something from a reference, and for example, you look at an eye, you start thinking, I am drawing an eye at this moment. And if you have if there is lack of knowledge in your fundamentals, in this case anatomy, you'll start making a lot of mistakes because you'll start drawing an eye as a symbol, but not as it actually is, anatomy wise. But when you flip your reference upside down, you start seeing clear shapes, because, as I said before, your brain is not used to seeing objects upside down. So it is easier for you to stop drawing symbols that you learned before and start seeing things as they are, if that makes sense. well, you can try it and you will notice it. But it is only beneficial when you're copying from a photo, from a reference. Because in your, like, if you're drawing something from your imagination, it doesn't really work. But what works is just flipping your canvas, because your eyes after some time get used to what they're seeing, and you stop seeing mistakes. But when you flip the canvas, you start seeing those mistakes a lot clearly, because uh, the thing that you see
Yeah,
changes and you see it in a different way.
yeah. I was working on that the category, art, and
Mm-hmm.
then I didn't flip it,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought it looked good. Like
Mm-hmm.
I knew it wasn't perfect, but it looked good.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I flip it, man, I just regret it so hard. Like I was drawing her just to test an app, to record my computer
Mm-hmm.
screen.
Mm-hmm.
So I had it all recorded, but I just deleted because I had to fix everything up, after
Mm-hmm.
with the Photoshop tool.
Mm-hmm.
But damn, if I didn't flip it, probably I would really be ashamed of myself
Well, I don't think that you
because
should be ashamed of yourself. All of us are people and everyone does mistakes, especially when you start out. So it's fine. You shouldn't really. You shouldn't start killing yourself mentally for the mistakes that you did. In my opinion, you should learn from them. So, I mean, it was your experience that you noticed that by flipping your image, you start seeing mistakes. So, the next time you draw, you'll start applying this technique and it will start helping you, and your works will
yeah,
look
totally.
better. I mean, of course, it is good to be critical of your own work, but still, you should enjoy it. And for example, if other people start saying it's shit, well, their critique is shit because it doesn't really help in any way. So there'll be a lot of negativity, but you shouldn't still kill yourself for those mistakes. It's all good. You'll learn eventually. It all takes time and practice. I mean, the idea that can motivate you is that by working, you'll eventually achieve what you want. So the thing is that you have to work and you'll learn those stuff that you want to learn. And the best way to do that is to learn from the artists that you actually like and not from like typical teachers maybe that you don't personally enjoy their own work. In my opinion, it is better to learn from people that you actually like. Of course, you can learn from everyone and you can still find some useful information that way, but still, in my opinion, it is better to learn from people who you like.
Well, it was a really great conversation we
Yeah.
just had.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna eat something. I'm
Okay.
really hungry right now.
Okay.
Okay, so see you soon.
Okay, see you soon. Have a great meal. Goodbye.
Thanks, man. Goodbye.
Свана на жидік мене. Ой, мікрофон не сів.